She was already seated when he walked in, fingers resting lightly on the edge of the table as if the chair had always belonged to her. His chair, his table, his building, his name on the glass downstairs, his decade of sacrifice on every floor of it. And she was sitting at the head of it like she had always been there, with a glass of water she hadn't touched, a folder she hadn't opened, and a stillness that made the room feel very small. He stopped at the door. 32 people went quiet. Effective immediately, the chairman said, Jasmine Adiz Carter holds 52.3% of total company shares and assumes the role of chief executive officer. A pen slipped from someone's hand and clattered against the polished floor. No one moved to pick it up. Jasmine opened her folder. Her eyes stayed on the folder, as if the man at the door no longer had the power to pull her gaze. She had spent years looking at him. That part of her life had closed quietly, like a door she had locked from the inside. To understand how we got to that room, to understand what it took, we have to go back. All the way back to the beginning. Welcome to Forbidden Love Stories. If you are new here, subscribe right now, hit the bell so you never miss a story, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you are watching from. And if this story moves you the way I think it will, like it and share it before it ends. Now, let's go back. Jasmine Adiz Carter grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, not the part that ends up on magazine covers, but the part that builds character whether you ask for it or not. Her mother worked 2 jobs. Her father was not in the picture. She was raised between her grandmother's kitchen and the public library, and she understood very early that no one was coming to hand her anything. She earned a full scholarship to Seoul National University on the strength of a 4.0 GPA and an essay about watching her mother count coins in a parking lot. She did not tell her mother she had applied until the letter arrived. When it did, her mother sat down at the kitchen table and cried without making a sound. Then she stood up and made jollof rice, the grandmother's recipe, for hours, and they ate together like it was a holiday. Jasmine arrived in Seoul in September 2009, 20 years old, with 2 suitcases and the composure of someone who has already survived the hardest part and trusts she can survive what comes next. She met Kwon Dong-hyun in an economics lecture on a Tuesday morning in October. She had arrived late, taken the only seat left, uncapped her highlighter, and the boy 2 seats to her left leaned over without looking up from his own notebook and said, in clean, lightly accented English, that highlighter bleeds through. You'll lose everything from yesterday. He was not trying to impress her. He simply noticed something and said it, the way you tell a stranger they've dropped their keys, because not saying it would feel like a failure. She looked at him. He had a face that took a moment to fully land. Not immediately striking, but warm in a way that accumulated. The face of someone who had never been required to be cruel and had therefore never learned how. Kwon Dong-hyun. Jasmine Carter. He smiled and went back to his notes. That was all. And yet that night, sitting alone in her dorm room, Jasmine felt, for the first time since landing in Seoul, like she was somewhere she was supposed to be. Friendship built between them the way real friendships do, not in one moment, but across accumulated hours. Late nights in the library, shared vending machine dinners, conversations that started about coursework and ended somewhere neither of them planned. He was business management. She was accounting. The overlap was considerable, in curriculum and in how they thought. Both of them allergic to easy answers. Both inclined to keep asking why long after the class had moved on. He included her effortlessly, not with the performance of someone seeking credit for being welcoming. Just naturally, the way you include someone who belongs. She noticed this. She noticed everything about him. She was in love with him by the 3rd month. She knew it clearly, the way you know a diagnosis, with certainty and a quiet reluctance and a decision, made firmly and alone, to do absolutely nothing about it. Then Park Eugene arrived. She came into their group in the 2nd semester like someone returning to a room she had always owned. Old family, old money. She had known Dong-hyun since childhood. Their families moved in the same circles. And when she sat beside him in the library and touched his arm when she laughed, Jasmine turned back to her textbook and highlighted a line she had already read. They started dating in March. Dong-hyun told Jasmine over coffee, nervous and barely hiding it, and Jasmine looked at him and said she was happy for him. She meant it. She also meant everything she was not saying. Both were true at the same time. Final year. Spring. 3 weeks before examinations. He knocked on her door at 11 on a Wednesday night. She opened it, read his body language in 2 seconds. The careful, load-bearing stillness of a man carrying something fragile, and let him in without speaking. Eugene is pregnant, he said. She wants to end it. I asked her not to. His voice caught. I want her to know she doesn't have to do this alone. Jasmine looked at him. She thought, I could say the thing I have never said. Right now, I could say it and let it change everything. She thought, not like this. Not now. Call her, Jasmine said. Tell her what you told me. Not the words, the feeling behind them. She'll hear the difference. He called. Eugene kept the baby. They graduated. Hansio was born in August 2013. Dong Hyun sent Jasmine a photo from the hospital. Just the baby, swaddled, eyes barely open. She stared at it for a long time. She wrote back, he's perfect. She put her phone face down and stayed very still. There was something she did not say with that message. Something she had known since before the birth. A conversation overheard. A name said carelessly on a phone call she was never meant to hear. A timeline that did not add up no matter how many times she ran it. Hansio was not Dong Hyun's son. She was almost certain of it. She held that certainty closed in her fist. It was not her truth to give. She would not use it to force a choice. She folded that truth away and carried it silently, the way people carry fragile glass in their pockets. 3 months after Hansio's birth, Park Eugene married Choi Min-jun, chairman of the third largest conglomerate in South Korea, a man whose fortune made Dong Hyun's family money look like a rounding error. Jasmine read the announcement before he did. She drove to his apartment. She found him on the living room floor, not dramatic, just sitting, back against the couch, phone beside him with the announcement still on screen, like he had read it and simply stopped. She sat beside him on the floor and she stayed. No easy words. No hollow reassurances. She came back the next day and the day after that. She cooked when he forgot to eat, sat with him through the hollow quiet that meant a person had temporarily misplaced the reason to speak, and once, at his desperate request, called Eugene directly. Made her case quietly, carefully. Eugene listened to all of it and said, "Tell him I wish him well. He has you." She hung up. Jasmine sat in her car for a long time, saying nothing to no one. Grief lifts the way a tide goes out. So gradually, you only notice the shoreline is wider when you look back and realize you have been breathing again for a while. It was a January evening. She had made jollof rice from her grandmother's recipe, and he had eaten 2 bowls without noticing. He was talking about a business idea, digital infrastructure for mid-sized Korean companies, a gap in the market everyone had missed by only looking upward. She was asking questions, drawing the idea out into the light where it could be examined. He stopped mid-sentence. He looked at her, not the way he had looked at her before. The way a person looks at something they have walked past 100 times in one ordinary day, for no reason they can name, actually sees. "Thank you," he said, "for all of it. For staying." "I know," she said, and went back to her rice. 6 weeks later, he stood in her kitchen in his coat and told her how he felt. Without strategy, without performance, with the urgency of a man who has made the decision on the commute and is afraid to lose the nerve of it. He said he thought he had loved her longer than he knew how to say. "Take your coat off," she said. "You're letting the cold in." He laughed, the first real laugh she had heard from him in months, and that was that. She built the company with him the way she built everything, from the inside, precisely, without needing anyone to name what she was doing. She rebuilt his investor pitch from scratch, mapped the financial runway, identified the capital gaps, and restructured the early stage model so that when he walked into that first investor meeting, he walked in as a man who understood not only his vision but every way it could fail and why it wouldn't. The meeting ended with a term sheet. She worked her own accounting firm by day and his company by night. She drafted partnership agreements, read market reports, flagged risks before they materialized, and turned them into opportunities before he ever had to face them as problems. She gave all of it without keeping score, because she believed in what they were building, and because, if she was honest, she had always believed in him most of all. The company grew. A government contract in year 3, a public offering in year 4. By year 6, Kwon Technology Holdings was on every major business publication in Korea, and Dong Hyun Kwon's name had become synonymous with vision and success. Jasmine's name appeared in none of those articles. She noted this. She filed it. She kept working. They married in April 2016. Cherry blossoms still on the trees. His family came to the wedding. They were not unkind. That was the thing she would come to understand over the years. They were never unkind. Unkind would have been easier to name, easier to confront, easier to hold up as evidence of something wrong. What they were was something more difficult, civil. Perfectly, consistently, deliberately civil in a way that kept a precise distance between acceptance and belonging. His mother embraced her at the reception with both arms and both eyes open, the hug lasting exactly as long as courtesy required. She told Jasmine she was beautiful and meant it the way people mean things they have decided to mean, not because the feeling arrived naturally, but because they are gracious enough to perform it. His father gave a toast that ran 4 minutes. He spoke about his son's resilience, his vision, his capacity to rise. He mentioned Jasmine once, briefly, as a subordinate clause, before returning to the subject of Donghyun. Jasmine raised her glass with everyone else. She kept her face warm and open. She filed every word away. In the years that followed, the distance never closed. At family dinners, conversations navigated around her with the easy fluency of people who have practiced it without ever once saying they were doing it. Her opinions on the business were received with the attentive courtesy of people who had no intention of acting on them. When decisions were made about the company she had structured, the company whose financial DNA was hers, she would learn about them after the fact, from her husband, who had learned about them from his father. She was in the family. She was not of it. And the difference, lived daily, was its own kind of erosion. She did not complain. She did not perform hurt. She channeled everything into the work, because the work was real and solid and hers in ways that no family dinner ever made her feel. Suwa was born in February 2017, small and fierce, with Donghyun's eyes and Jasmine's composure. For a while, holding her daughter, Jasmine allowed herself to believe that belonging might come with time, that a grandchild softens things, that patience eventually pays. She was still learning which things patience cannot fix. Suwa was 2 years old when Eugene appeared at the door. She did not call ahead. She arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in 2019, coat slightly rumpled, eyes that had recently cried and tried to repair the evidence. Hanseo stood beside her, 6 years old, holding her hand with the quiet wariness of a child who has been through too many adult conversations. Choi Min-jun had filed for divorce. The prenuptial agreement had left Eugene with very little. She had calculated, as she always calculated, where the softest landing was. And she arrived at the same answer she always did. Jasmine stood in her own doorway and looked at this woman, looked at the boy. "Come in," she said. The family meeting was called within the week. Donghyun's father sat at the head of his table and delivered his position in the measured tone of a man who has already decided and is now explaining. He spoke about Hanseo, about legacy and lineage, about what a name requires and who carries it forward. He noted, with complete courtesy, that Jasmine had given Donghyun a daughter, a blessing, yes, but not an heir. He never raised his voice. He did not need to. Donghyun sat across from his father and listened. Jasmine sat across from her husband and watched him being convinced. She watched the slow, incremental process of a man talking himself into a decision that had already been made for him, and she did not interrupt any of it, because some arguments cannot be won in the room they are lost in. He came to her on a Thursday night. He sat at the edge of their bed and said the words as carefully as a person says words they know cannot be made gentle, and she listened to all of them. And when he was finished, she said, "I understand." She got up. She went to Sua's room and sat in the chair beside her daughter's bed and did not cry. She watched her daughter sleep. She breathed. What followed was not dramatic. It was methodical. Eugene moved into the house with the efficiency of a woman who understands that possession is not established by confrontation, but by accumulation. Small adjustments at first, a new cushion, a rearranged shelf, Jasmine's preferred cookware moved to a lower cabinet. Each change individually negligible. Collectively, a slow replacement of one person's presence with another's, done so gradually that there was never a single moment to point to and say, that was when it happened. Donghyun's mother visited constantly now. She and Eugene had a language between them built from decades of shared codes, family names, social references, a shorthand that Jasmine understood technically but had never been invited to speak. At the dinner table that was Jasmine's dinner table, in the house that was Jasmine's house, conversations moved around her like water around a stone. She was addressed politely, included minimally, and made to feel, without a single rude word ever being said, that she was a guest in a life that had already moved on without her. At the company, her name began disappearing from internal communications she had always been copied on. Meetings she had attended for years were scheduled without her being informed. Her suggestions in the rare instances when she was consulted were received with careful nods and quietly set aside. The message was never spoken. It didn't need to be. She documented everything. She said nothing. She stayed. Until the morning she came home and found Sua's drawings taken down from the hallway wall. The lopsided sun, the purple elephant, the family portrait where everyone's arms were too long, stacked neatly on the hallway table to make room for a new gallery arrangement. Neutral prints, tasteful frames. Jasmine stood in the hallway and looked at the stack. She carried the drawings into Sua's room. She taped them back up, one by one, pressing each piece of tape flat against the wall. Then she sat down on the floor of her daughter's room and stayed there for a long time. When she got up, she called her lawyer. The filing was not impulsive. She had retained the lawyer 2 months earlier, quietly, as preparation, the way she retained everything important. The paperwork was already drafted, already reviewed until she understood exactly what every word would cost and what it would return. She packed one bag for herself and one for Sua. She buckled her daughter into the car seat and listened to her talk about whether elephants could fly if they wanted to badly enough. Maybe, Jasmine said, if they wanted to badly enough. She drove away from the house without looking back. She was 7 weeks pregnant. She had confirmed it the week before she filed. She told no one, not her lawyer, not her mother. She held it the way she held everything that mattered, close and quiet, and entirely to herself. She settled Sua with her mother in Atlanta and went to Geneva. She restructured her holdings. She built quietly, without anyone watching, which was exactly how she had always preferred to work. Her son was born in November. She named him Jiho, for kilograms. Eyes that opened immediately and looked at her with the calm certainty of someone who has arrived and intends to stay. She held him in that hospital room alone and felt something that was not triumph, not relief, something steadier. Like ground rebuilt from scratch. Like standing on something that cannot be moved. She called Sua on video and showed her the baby. He's small, Sua said. He'll get bigger, Jasmine said. She did not call Donghyun. He did not know Jiho existed. She had not decided yet what to do with that. She filed it the way she filed everything that mattered, and went back to work. Back in Seoul, Donghyun was living a life that had never felt like a life. The warmth between him and Eugene was performed, not felt, the kind manufactured when a decision needs to look like love. He was living inside that choice, and the inside was smaller and colder and quieter than he had imagined. The company, meanwhile, was showing stress fractures in its financial structure, small, persistent cracks that his new CFO could not locate because the architecture had been Jasmine's, maintained in her specific language, and without her it was becoming a language no one in that building could fully read. It was a Tuesday evening in early spring when everything changed. He had come home earlier than expected. The house was quiet. Eugene had taken Hansio to a school event, or so the message on his phone said. He went to the kitchen to make himself something to eat and passed the study. And through the open door he saw Eugene's laptop open on the desk, its screen still lit. He had no intention of looking. He had gone in to close it, to save the battery, nothing more, and the document open on the screen caught his eye because it was not a document he recognized. It appeared to be a private message thread exported to a file, long and scrollable, and the name at the top was not one he knew. He stood at the desk for a long moment. Then he sat down. The messages were between Eugene and a man she called by a nickname Donghyun did not recognize. The tone of the earliest messages, from years ago, before she had dated Donghyun, before any of it, was intimate in a way that was unmistakable. Old. Familiar. The kind of familiar that does not develop quickly. He scrolled forward slowly. The way you move through a place you have never been and are not certain you should be. He found the messages from 2013. He read them carefully. Then he read them again. The thread covered the weeks when Eugene had discovered the pregnancy. She wrote to this man plainly, not with guilt, not with confusion, but with the practical clarity of someone who has assessed a situation and found a solution. She wrote that she had taken the test, that she was certain it was his, that Dong Hyun did not know about their relationship and would not think to question the timing because, she wrote, and here Dong Hyun went very still. He was that kind of man, the trusting kind, the kind who would count back the weeks and accept whatever number he arrived at. She wrote that she planned to tell Dong Hyun the baby was his. She wrote that it was the cleaner option. The room did not move. Dong Hyun sat in the chair in the study of his own house and read the words and did not move for a very long time. His mind was doing two things simultaneously, processing the language on the screen and resisting the full weight of what that language meant. The way a person will stand in a doorway for a moment before a room that has been destroyed, not because they do not understand what they are seeing, but because understanding it completely will cost something they are not sure they can afford. He scrolled further. He did not know why. Perhaps because some part of him was still hoping to find the message that contradicted all the others. The one that would make this into something different, something he could survive more easily. He did not find that message. What he found instead was a message from years later, after his marriage to Eugene, after she had moved into his house, after Jasmine had already been gone for months. Eugene, writing to the same man, recounting the day Jasmine had called her at Dong Hyun's request, the call during his depression, when he had begged Jasmine to reach out on his behalf. Eugene had described the conversation in detail, how Jasmine had made her case, how she had spoken about what the separation was doing to Dong Hyun. And this was the sentence Dong Hyun read 4 times, slowly, each time arriving at the same understanding. Eugene wrote that during that call, something in the way Jasmine spoke had made her certain. Jasmine already knew, not suspected, knew. She had said something careful and oblique, the way someone speaks when they are carrying a truth that belongs to someone else and have decided not to throw it. Eugene had written, she knew the whole time and said nothing. She called me for him, knowing. Dong Hyun put the laptop exactly as he had found it. He stood up. He walked out of the study and into the living room and sat down in the dark. He sat there until he heard Eugene's key in the door. When she came in, he looked at her face and she looked at his, and whatever she saw there made her go still in the hallway. How long, he said. The question was quiet. There was no anger in it. That, perhaps, was what frightened her most. She sat down across from him and told him. Not everything. She edited, the way she always edited, but enough. Enough that by the time she was finished, he had the shape of the whole thing. Hansio, the timing, the choice she had made, and what it had been based on. He asked her to leave. She did not argue. He filed for divorce that same week. There was no prenuptial agreement. Eugene had refused one, had framed its absence as evidence of trust and permanence. She left with a significant portion of his assets. His family said nothing. The mother who had sat across the table from Jasmine and spoken about legacy and lineage and the importance of an heir said nothing now. There was nothing to say that would not make it worse. The heir was not his son. The woman they had pushed out the door had been right about everything they had not wanted to hear. They said nothing. They went very quiet. He went to find Jasmine in October. She was at the park near her apartment in Gangnam, sitting on a bench while Suwa ran circles in the cold, bright air. He sat down beside her. She watched her daughter and did not look at him. He told her what he had found. The laptop, the messages, the years of it. He told her plainly, without asking for credit. He was not there to manage how she saw him. He was there because what he now understood was too heavy to carry alone. You knew, he said, not accusing. Just saying. Yes, she said. Since when? Since before he was born. The cold, bright air moved between them. Suwa ran and laughed and did not notice. Why didn't you say anything? She turned and looked at him then. Her face was not angry. It was not cold. It was the face of someone who has been asked a question she has lived with the answer to for a very long time. Because it was not mine to say. I was not going to use what I knew to make you choose me. That is not love. That is leverage. I didn't want you that way. He told her he was sorry. He said it in every form the word takes, with his voice, with his eyes, with the particular posture of a man who has nothing left to protect and is simply offering the truth of his regret. She listened to all of it. I forgive you, she said. quiet, and complete. I have been carrying this too long, and I am putting it down. But forgiveness is not the same thing as starting over. I have built something. For myself, for my children, and it is mine, and I do not need it completed by you. He heard the word. Children. She turned back to watch Suah. Go home, Dong-hyun, she said. 2 weeks later he received notice of a board meeting. Standard wording. A 3-item agenda. Nothing in the language that should have alarmed him. She was already seated when he walked in, fingers resting lightly on the edge of the table as if the chair had always belonged to her. He stopped at the door. 32 people were already quiet. Effective immediately, the chairman said, Jasmine Adiz Carter holds 52.3% of total company shares. By vote of the board, she assumes the role of chief executive officer. The room did not breathe. He understood it all in one moment. How long she had been buying. How quietly. How patiently. Through the investor rounds. Through the public offering. Through every year, he had been too busy looking at his own reflection in magazine covers to see what she was doing in the background. She had built him. And then, when he had not valued what she built, she had simply kept going. She had kept buying. She had kept growing. She had become the majority of a company that still bore his name. And she had done it without asking for his permission or his attention or his gratitude. She opened her folder. She looked up. She found his eyes across the room. Her face was not triumphant. It was not cold. It was the face of a woman who has set down every heavy thing she was carrying and discovered, in the lightness, exactly who she is. She held his gaze for one moment. Then she looked back at her documents. She had work to do. Dong-hyun Kwon stood in the doorway of the company that bore his name. His name on the glass downstairs. His face in the lobby. His decade of sacrifice on every floor of the building he could no longer run. He thought about the girl who had arrived in Seoul with 2 suitcases and built a life around believing in him, who had sat on his floor in the dark, who had rebuilt his pitch, structured his company, shaped every deal that had made him what he was, who had known the truth about Hanseo for years and carried it in silence rather than use it as a weapon, who had called Eugene for him, at his request, with her own dignity as the price, and said nothing about what it cost her, who had said I forgive you and meant it completely, who had then said go home. He thought about the words she had used in the park. Children. Not child. Children. He was only beginning, standing there, in the particular silence of 32 people who had already moved on, to understand what that word had meant. He had loved 2 women in his life. One had used him. One had built him. And the one who had built him was sitting in his chair, in the company he would have been nothing without. And she was not looking at the door. She was not looking at the door. If this story moved you, share it right now with someone who needs to see what quiet strength looks like. Like this video, subscribe to Forbidden Love Stories, and drop a comment below telling us where in the world you are watching from. Some stories don't end. They arrive at the moment before the ending and leave you there, in the space where the weight of everything is finally being felt. See you in the next one.